Hi, I'm Eliot, the IELTS expert at Magoosh. I've been helping English language learners and people studying for the IELTS exam for over 15 years, and I love helping students achieve their goals on the IELTS exam. In this lesson, we're going to be thinking about the reading section of the IELTS exam and looking at tips that are going to help you to not only finish the exam more quickly and more efficiently, but also answer more questions correctly. There are some key strategies you need to know in order to do your best on this difficult section of the IELTS exam. So let's look at the key strategies you're going to need for the IELTS reading section.
First, I want to start by discussing just very quickly the standard approach to taking a reading exam. This is something that you've probably done before in your English classes. So the standard approach is to carefully read a passage from beginning to end and then answer comprehension questions about the passage. This makes a lot of sense. Your teachers want to have you read a passage and then test what you were able to figure out and what you knew after reading it one time. Unfortunately, this approach, if you take this approach on the IELTS exam, it will be very difficult for you. And the reason is that the time is too limited to carefully read a passage and then answer all the questions on the IELTS exam. You only have 60 minutes and you have several passages to read, and time is simply too limited for most people to finish all the questions in a short 1 hour period. Secondly, IELTS questions are difficult to answer using the standard approach. They ask you many detailed questions or other types of main idea questions that are tough to answer if you've only read the passage one time. So you need a different way of approaching the passages and the questions, and that's what we're going to look at in this lesson. We need to find a good solution for approaching each of these questions and passages. So what is it? Well, it is definitely not to read the entire passage carefully from beginning to end. For IELTS reading questions, you should instead strategically search for answers to questions in the passage instead of reading each passage carefully. This means that really what you're going to do is begin with the questions. You start with the questions you need to answer and you go search for the answers in the passage. That's the approach that works best on the IELTS exam. Now, you need a strategy for this. You need a general approach, and so that's what we're looking at here. All right, so let's start with skimming and scanning. Now, if you're not familiar with skimming and scanning, or if you haven't seen it yet, there is a whole lesson on skimming and scanning in the Magoosh IELTS YouTube channel. So go ahead and look for that video there if you need to learn how to skim and scan, or if you need a refresher on that topic. Here, we're going to just talk about how to use it with these reading questions. So when you come to a new passage, the first thing you should do is take a few seconds to look at the question types you're going to answer. So by the time you take the exam, you should be able to quickly identify what question type you'll need to answer. Then you want to go and skim the passage. So after you've looked at what question type you're going to answer, then turn to your passage. And if you are taking the general training IELTS exam, expect to spend about 30 seconds to 2 minutes skimming the shorter passages that come at the beginning of the general training reading paper. At the end of the general training reading paper, you're going to have a longer passage, and all of the academic reading passages are long as well. So for those, you should spend 2 to 4 minutes skimming the passage. You are doing this instead of reading it carefully from beginning to end. Reading carefully from beginning to end might take you 10 minutes or 12 minutes. So skimming is going to save you time, and if you do it strategically, you are going to get the information you need to approach the questions. Your goal in skimming the passage is basically to get the gist of the article and in addition to the gist, getting a sense of the organization of the passage as well. So you want to get some information as you're searching through the passage about what each paragraph is about. So after you've skimmed the passage, okay, then you go to the directions and the questions. If it helps you, go ahead and underline the answer sheet format that you're supposed to use to answer the question. So if there's short answer, or are you supposed to answer with letters or numbers or numerals, make sure you note the word count, the number and word counts here. And if it helps you, go ahead and underline them so you can go and remember that or be reminded of that information quickly later on. Okay, but more importantly than this, then you want to go and underline any key words that are found in the directions. The directions for different types of questions will generally stay the same, and so through our lessons and then through the practice questions you do, you will become pretty familiar with what the directions say. But every set of directions will ask you to look for something a little bit different. There will be a focus to the directions that is directing you to certain kinds of information in the passage. For example, let's imagine we have a matching question, and in the directions, it tells us match each item with the person who invented it. You would want to underline person who invented, because that is the information you are supposed to search for in the passage. Okay? You are going to search for people who invented things. So your answer is going to be a person, and that person is going to be an inventor. And that's the key information that you will need to search for in the passage to answer each question in this series of questions. All right, your underlining allows you to remember that and stay focused on that task alone. Then you want to go to questions and do a very similar thing. So this information is often in the directions. In the questions then, you want to go and underline key words from the questions. Remember that correct answers are almost always paraphrases in the passage. So by underlining keywords, and I'm talking about just taking a few seconds to go through the questions you're answering and make underlines of the keywords you're searching for, this will help you to look for paraphrases in the passage to help you answer the question. Okay, so far we've skimmed the whole passage, and now we've looked quickly through the directions and the questions to underline keywords and the main purpose of the question that we're trying to answer, what we're supposed to be looking for as we go back to the passage and search for answers. A second step then is to use notes to do something very similar to what you just did with underlining. But this time, your notes are going to be related to the passage, not really the questions, but the passage itself. All right, so as you're scanning and as you're finding information to answer your questions, you want to help yourself by writing 1 or 2 word notes in the margins of a reading passage. The margins, okay, so if the lines of our reading passage are here, the margins are this space on either side where you can write some notes to yourself. You don't want to write long notes, 1 or 2 words is fine, but there are some reminders and some notes that will help you to answer questions if you put them in the margins of your reading passage. So your notes should target the type of information being tested in the question. Some question types are only about main ideas, and again, we're going to learn about those question types in your lessons. But if you're looking for main ideas, then you should definitely label each paragraph with the main idea of that paragraph, 1 or 2 words to help you remember what that paragraph is about. Are you looking at a flow chart? So a flow chart shows you a process from beginning to end. Okay, so if you're looking at a chart, that relates to the reading, probably the different paragraphs of the reading, or maybe one paragraph, will be about that process, and it will give you steps in the process. So you should, in your reading passage and alongside the margins, label the steps as you find them in the passage. You know by looking at the questions that you're supposed to find this information. So you label it to let you know where to look as you're answering questions. You can write step 1, step 2, or whatever makes sense for that particular chart you're looking at. There are some question types where the answers come in order. So you find the answer to number 1 before you find the answer to number 2 in the passage. On these kinds of questions, write a note. If you find an answer that you are very confident is correct, then that spot in the reading passage where you found that answer is a good place to label and identify. Answer for number 10. Because the answers for numbers 7, 8, and 9 are going to come before that in the passage. It gives you a sign and a reminder as you're answering other questions to let you know where to look in the passage to find those answers.
All right, hope you liked the video. Be sure to check out the link in the description below. That will take you to magoosh.com, where you can find IELTS lessons, practice questions for all 4 sections of the test, mock tests, everything you need to crush the IELTS exam. And you can use the coupon code IELTS Reading Rockstar to get a discount on the course. If you like these tips and strategies, check out these videos, and I'll see you in the next lesson.